Hello, welcome to this video on the Vijnana Bhairava Tantra. Today we will see two verses that belong to a series we started to read last time, a series about our relationship to our body. Is this our only body, or is there something else? Verse 103. Na cittaṃ nikṣiped duḥkhe, na sukhe va parikṣipet, bhairavi jñāyatāṃ madhye, tattvam avaśiṣyate. O Goddess Bhairavi, O Goddess, one should not throw one's attention, not cittaṃ parikṣipet, one should not completely throw one's attention, nikṣiped, parikṣipet, one should not completely throw one's attention in pain or in unease, duḥkhe, and one should not throw it completely either in happiness, na sukhe va parikṣipet. And then where should one put one's attention? Jñāyatāṃ madhye. One should know the center, the middle, that is consciousness, awareness, the awareness that projects herself in pain and in happiness. That is madhye, the center that shines in between, as it were, but as well that transcends pain and pleasure, ease and unease, all the opposites. Tattvam avaśiṣyate, and then what remains? Well, only pure being, reality remains. Reality is what remains. Sukha duḥkhayo vihāya cittaṃ na vidheyam. One should not settle one's attention, one's mind, into pleasure and pain. Aham sukhī, aham duḥkhe, such as I am happy, I am unhappy. Shuddhe svatmani antahkarana dharman, sukha duḥkhādīn adhyasya nastheyam. One should not remain having projected the judgments of pleasure and pain made by which are attributes of the inner organ of the mind, onto the pure self, onto one's own pure self. Svatmani adhyasya. One should not project, superimpose on oneself. Kintu jñāyatāṃ tvaya swayameva vicharaya. But one should know, having investigated tvaya swayameva, the notions of you and I, madhye, in the center of that, in between you and me. One should investigate through you, that is by oneself, by one's very self, because you, Bhairavi, the goddess, is one's very self, is consciousness. And one should investigate that center, madhye. Tattvam avaśiṣyate iti. Madhye yat tattvam taksakshibhutam, that center, that being which is directly entreated, directly perceived. Tad anusandhatri ekam cittadvam. That is consciousness, the one consciousness, which is that which, how to say, that which puts into relation the opposites, pleasure and pain. I was happy, now I am unhappy. What synthesizes, what puts into relationship, what unifies those various experiences, that is consciousness. So memory is a very important doorway to the realization of consciousness. Ekagriyena vimrisha, realizing with a one-pointed mind, that itself tadeva. So one should realize that being which transcends and embraces and contains, pervades all the opposites like pleasure and pain, and without just identifying oneself and forgetting oneself into those feelings of pleasure and pain, and without identifying with them. Na swatmani adhyasya, not imposing them on oneself, not judging them, not projecting them on oneself, on the pure self, but rather recognizing in oneself the pure attributes like sarvagatvam, omniscience, sarvakartritvam, omnipotency, and nityatvam, permanence. Next verse, Sanskrit first, 104. Vihāya nijadehasthaṃ sarvatrāsmīti bhāvayan dṛḍhena manasā dṛṣṭyā nānyekṣiṇyā sukhī bhavet. Having given up vihāya, nijadehasthaṃ, the consciousness that dwells only in one's own body, that is, having given up the identification to one's own body only, sarvatrāsmīti bhāvayan, and realizing and deeply feeling that I am everywhere, sarvatrāsmī, that I am everywhere, bhāvayan. So bhavana again means both to feel deeply something, a truth, and then to realize something which is already the case, but to which one has not yet paid fully attention. So fully realizing, not taking to mind, but fully realizing, making fully real. Dṛḍhena manasā dṛṣṭyā, by a stable mental view. He says mental, I was hesitating, but he says manasā, by the mind, by the mind view, manasā dṛṣṭyā, which is dṛḍhena, which is stable. Nānyekṣiṇyā, because one does not any longer depend on another. Because when I identify only to this body, then this body depends on its environment, air, food, drink, others, and so many other things, everything in fact. But when I identify myself to everyone and to everything, then I do not depend on any other, because there is no longer any other. Everything is me, so there is no other, so I am no more dependent. And then sukhī bhavet, that yogi, that one will become happy, at ease, sukhī again, being in the good, in the right emptiness at the center of the wheel, the right center, well centered. So I just give up the exclusive identification to that body, and I identify to everything. That is, I do not really even identify, I just let everything appear, and I realize that I am everything. This is what it comes down to. I realize that I am everything. Whatever appears, whatever is perceived is my body. I am the perceiver, the awareness that shines as this and that. And all that shines, all that appears in my awareness, all that appears to my awareness is my body. That is everything, all that is perceived outside, inside, real, unreal, whatever. All that is my body. And the commentator Shivopadhyaya rightly connects that verse with the previous one, which began with Chiddharma, saying that the presence, the attribute of the power of consciousness is not only in my body, but is everywhere present in all bodies without differences. Ukta Chinmatratma Shivavat. Yes. And then we have Yat Saugatamata Anumodana Rasikena Samvaditam Yadahu Saugata Api. And then he quotes the Buddhists, Saugata. He quotes the Buddhists. And first he gives the quotes about saying that, well, he quotes the previous verse of the Vijnana Bhairava, which said that consciousness is present everywhere without difference in all bodies. Without difference, it's present in big bodies, small bodies, pure bodies, impure bodies, good and bad, beautiful and ugly. But then he goes on in a kind of an aside, and he quotes a text called the flowers of the bouquet of categories, the tattvam. And he says that person, so I just said that in Sanskrit, Saugatamata Anumodana Rasikena Sambhaditam, he takes his delight in the thought of the Buddhists. And he says that quote by that person, that unknown person who delights in the Buddhist thinking, in the Buddhist teaching, says, if there is any I, then there is fear of being. There is fear of being. There is vastu bhayam. There is fear of reality. There is fear of reality. If there is an I, then I fear reality. If there is no I, then how could there be any fear? So this is akin to the Buddhist manner of speaking. If there is no I, there is no problem. If there is an I, it is the root of all problems, of all pains, of all kleshas. And then he gives a Buddhist quote, and I think it's Dharmakirti, the famous Buddhist philosopher. If there is an I, there is an other, and then there are all possible manners of love and hate and passions and conflicts and violence. It's the source of all the defects. Sarve doshaha prajayanti. It's the source of all the defects of samsara, of becoming, of all the pains, in other words. But then, what is interesting is that Shivopadhyaya distinguishes that Buddhist view of the I from a Shaiva view of the I, and he takes a quote from obviously a Shaiva Shakta text, unknown beside that quote, which is called Vimarsha-dīpika, the lamp of self-realization. You could translate. Vimarsha is very hard to translate. It says that that the I, aham iti, is uttamam tattvam, is supreme principle, supreme level of reality, supreme being. It is divyam aksharam, imperishable, it is divine, and it is swatantram, absolutely free, and it is both vishvatma vishvotirnam cha, it is both everything and beyond everything. And samavishya, having completely identified with that, penetrated in that, entered in that, bibhetikaha, who would be afraid? Who would be afraid? Everything is me. So you see, it's two opposite ways. The Buddhist way is to say there is no I. The Shaiva or Shakta way, Tantric way, is to say everything is I. Everything is I. So there is no fear as well, but it's a more inclusive way. Whereas the ways of the Buddhist, of the Sankhya, of the Vedanta are exclusive way. They reject everything. There is no me, there is nothing else, there is not this, there is not that. All that is illusion, all that is just appearance without any reality. It has no relationship to me, there is no me, there is no I in there. Nothing is of me, nothing belongs to me, nothing touches me. So it's a very exclusive way. And then the Shaiva Shaktas, Kashmir Shaivism, they put an objection to that conception because they say this is a vikalpa, this is a choice because this is based on exclusion, on apoha, rejecting, forgetting, rejecting the world, rejecting this and that in favor of a pure I, a pure self, but a pure self which is cut from everything, which is purely transcendent, vishvotirna only. So it's a vishvotirna pakshapata. It's falling on the side of transcendence and completely forgetting that everything is a manifestation of the self, of consciousness, of universal consciousness. So it's very different. It's two opposite ways. They claim the same result, but they're very different because the Shaiva way, the Shakta way, I should rather say, is inclusive. It's embracing everything. So it's more, you could say, magnanimous, literally. And then he quotes Hrasva, that is Vamana Nata, Viranata, again a text that had been already quoted, the Advaya Sampati, and here there is a different reading of the same title. Before it was Dvaya Sampati, now it's Advaya Sampati, non-dual realization, where it says the feeling of I, ahankara, making the sense of I, is beyond buddhi, is beyond the intellect, beyond the mind. So it's transcendent. It's not just an illusion created by the mind, it's beyond the mind. But then there is also a false mind, there is a kritrima, there is an artificial I, which is a pure construction, which is made of different concepts. And that should be completely unrooted. And then he gives a quote, I think, from the Mahabharata. But it's interesting that he quotes some texts that seem to be contemporaneous to him. People, he says, the author of the Tattva Manjari, who is admiring the Buddhist doctrines. So again, here we find Shivopadhyaya concerned with a possible confusion between Buddhism and non-dual Shaivism, Shakta, Kashmir Shaivism. And that shows that maybe there was, even at the time that is in the 17th century, there was some kind of a revival, a Buddhist, if not a Buddhist revival, at least a surge of interest for Buddhism that would explain why Shivopadhyaya is here and there, again and again, alluding to Buddhism and feels the need to make clear distinctions between the Buddhist emptiness, the tantric emptiness, the Buddhist notion of no I, no self, and the Shaiva notion of no self and what is really the self. So that's very interesting, because it shows that maybe there were some traces of Buddhism in Kashmir of 17th, 18th century, and on the eve of the modern era, on the eve of the modern era, and that there were enough texts to prompt such reactions. And there he alludes to a text that I don't know, it's the Tattva Manjari, and maybe it's a Nyaya text, maybe it's the Nyaya Manjari, even, I should check, of Udayana. And then there is the Vimarsha Deepika. There also I should check if I can find any reference, or even if that text is extant by somewhere else. Anyway, today we have seen that our body is not just our mind experience, but is much more beyond. We're invited to open up to a larger body, a more fluid body, a more extensible body, a more supple body, a body that is everything I perceive, all this, all that, an inclusive, an all-embracing, an all-pervading body, a universal body. But it's not something to be imagined, it's just to open to perception. Whatever I perceive is my body. Not just those hands, but also that pot, that sky, those trees, those mountains. Everything is my body. So that's an important practice. That's all for today. Thank you for listening, and see you next time.